did you have a question you wanted to start with or a comment you want to discuss with everything going on?
So one of the questions I'd love to get everyone, your opinion on especially, I don't know if you can see me too. Anyways, so as a survivor and as somebody who I deal with sexual assault and sexual harassment daily with my career, people send me so many articles and links, and it is very overwhelming. And so I feel guilty sometimes when I try to I guess block it off, or I just like I can't deal with it anymore. And so I'm kind of struggling with that, kind of juggling everything.
Yeah, it's a really important discussion. For anybody who's just getting on right now and you're hearing Carly going, how are people literally asking questions? Click on the link that we provided below this so that you can do that too. Carly, one, I want to thank you for sharing that your courage as a survivor. Is this the Carly I believe I know?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. So Carly is doing amazing work. We met years ago at an Illinois conference, if I remember correctly. Does that sound right, Carly?
Yep.
That's what I thought. Okay. And Carly's question was, for survivors or for people who are working in this field who right now, everybody's sending us links and going, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Oh my gosh, have you seen that? And what a lot of people don't realize is that when you work in the field we work in, we're getting this every day. Like this, the fact that this is happening the last 2 weeks has taken it to another level of volume. But our work involves those kind of cases all the time. We're hearing about that daily. So none of this is shocking. It's disappointing every time, but it's never shocking. So I think, Carly, you asked a good question, which is, what do you do when you're just getting overwhelmed? And this is true for anybody watching right now. You don't need to be somebody working in the field right now to be overwhelmed by all of this. You might not be a survivor, but yet you're feeling just overwhelmed by all of this. I want everybody to keep in mind one really important aspect of this. This isn't going away by all this news coverage happening in the next week or two. It's not going to solve the problem. So don't feel bad if you turn it off, as if you're going to miss something and you might miss out on a transformational moment in our country and how we're handling this topic. I sadly am confident we are far away from having the conversation about culturally what needs to change for this to actually stop. That's not happening. And until that happens, we've got a long road ahead of us. So you need to take care of yourselves. This is everyone listening. You need to take care of yourselves. And when you're seeing news story after sexual abuse, sexual violence, sexual harassment, it's healthy to turn it off. I turn it off. I take time away. And there may be people the last few days who are like, man, Mike has not been commenting much at all on these cases, because I step away. I step away intentionally so I can take care of my own mental, emotional state. If this is all I did was respond to these cases, I'd have no energy left. So I think, Carly, it's really important for everyone to understand, yes, it's okay to shut it down. Yes, it's okay when somebody sends you a link to not fully engage and go and have a response to every link somebody says other than, thank you for sending me the link. That's what I do. When they send me the link, I probably heard the case 9 out of 10 times. I'm just going to send thank you. I'm not going to go into this whole, yes, that's a travesty, yes, this, because it's just too draining and we need to take care of ourselves with all this happening at the same time. So awesome question, Carly. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, very cool.
Thanks.
So yeah, no, I think it's really important, especially for those of us who work in the field, that we're able to do that. Now, what I'm going to try to do is watch. We have so many people jumping on this Facebook Live. That's so awesome. Rena, a survivor who has spoken out before, also with us, is saying what we're discussing there is so important, which is you got to set boundaries. And that doesn't mean just for news and media. You got to set boundaries with friends, with family, to know that it's okay to walk out of the room because you don't want to engage in that conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. You got to know what you need. It's so, so important. Marianne, sorry. Hi, Patty. Hi. So many people jumping in here. Beth, hi. By the way, Beth, today we interviewed Jamie Schumacher for an upcoming discussion. So great to see all of you there. You can use Facebook to ask questions. So you can also, though, use that link and join Carly and I so we can have a live conversation. We can hear you and you can be able to ask that. Like Rick just joined, or Rick's been to toured with me once in Canada. And so he knows that we love Q&A. Just love, love, love that. So please feel free to be able to ask any questions you want. as we're going along here. I think it's just important. So let's get into everything that we've been hearing and talking about. I'm not going to cover one case in this Facebook Live. In other words, if you're getting on right now going, is Mike going to talk about Roy Moore for 30 minutes? No, that's not going to happen. Is Mike going to talk about the Al Franken case? Not the whole time. If somebody wants to ask a specific question, we'll respond. But this isn't about a specific case, and here's why. We're not going to transform our culture when we're stuck on an individual case. That's not going to transform anything. We're going to have transformation when we look at what role each of us has in how we got to where we are today as a society. That means myself. What role did I have growing up before I started doing this work? Even in my early stages of doing this work that might not have recognized all the ways I could have negatively influenced or failed to take action where I should have taken action or spoke out when I should have spoke out, and looking in the mirror and going, how did I contribute to this? Because if we all can be honest and look in the mirror and go, this culture's been here for hundreds of years in some element or form. So if we can all look in the mirror and go, where did I contribute? How did I contribute to this? It allows us to be able to talk with anyone. When we come in from a viewpoint of, I just cannot relate to anyone who's ever had thoughts like this, ever done anything like this, it makes it hard to actually connect with people who we might be able to help have a transformational moment. Let me explain what I mean by that. Most of us, by middle school or high school, were either engaged in telling sexually inappropriate jokes, sexist jokes is when I mean inappropriate, I'm referring to sexist, sexual inequality, the blonde joke that was always referencing typically women, jokes that were around degrading women sexually. Those have been part of our culture for a long, long time. We got to be able to look in the mirror and go, did I ever do that? Because if I did, then I need to be very careful of acting so self-righteous like I could never, and lose credibility for anybody who ever knew you going, come on, you once. You actually be able better off to go, I recognize I've said things in the past that I shouldn't have said. That's actually a better place to start the conversation from, because then we're acknowledging we're human, we're fallible, and I want to do better going forward. That's healthier. I've said from stage many times that when my sister was sexually assaulted, that was a wake-up call for me to recognize I need to look in the mirror. And by the way, it didn't just change overnight. It took me over a decade and decades, and I'm continually learning where I need to improve. Continually learning to this day. Even in this work, we're still surrounded by this culture everyone else is surrounded by. So we need to see, how am I being influenced? How is that impacting me? And how have I either used language or jokes or create an environment that wasn't as safe and as comfortable as it could have been? And we're not talking about stop having fun. We're talking about, are you having fun at the cost of harm to others? That's what we're talking about here. Are you creating an environment where sexual harm is being done? An environment of intimidation or uncomfortableness could be created. You know, and I'm constantly asking myself, have I done that? Have I engaged in that? Is there any way I could be doing that now? And just really making sure that I'm looking at me before looking at everybody else. I think that's really, really important here, that we're all able to do that. And there's so many of you joining Facebook Live. Please feel free to ask a question. And if you didn't catch before, there's a special Zoom link that's up in the post of this Facebook Live that you can click on. And by clicking on that, you can actually join Carly and I. So Carly is on with me right now. Carly does this work also. And Carly joined me just like any of you can join me, but you can hear Carly. Carly, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
First off, hi, everyone. I actually have another question, Mike, that I'm thinking about upcoming holidays coming up and getting together with family members. And I know that these topics are going to get brought up. And so do you have any tips for us that when victim blaming comes up by family members or other, uncomfortable comments, do you have any advice kind of how to conquer that?
Yeah, it's always so difficult in holiday settings, because you can walk into a home and mine is an example. This is my family's here. They'd agree. We have diverse political views. There's no doubt about it. Some of my family could be watching right now. We have very diverse political views. I think that you have to do what's right for you not being harmed, and also that hopefully no one else is being harmed. But I don't want somebody to feel like you have to fight all the wars at Thanksgiving and you pay the price for that. I think you have to be careful and really evaluate, is this me engaging going to do any good here? I think it's a legitimate question. Now, that doesn't mean to be quiet when harm is being done. I want to be very careful there. But I think there's nothing wrong with saying, this conversation's making me uncomfortable. I'm going to leave the room because this makes me uncomfortable. For instance, Carly, example you gave there, I feel like there's people victim blaming, and I don't know that that's done intentionally or not, but it makes it uncomfortable for me to be in the room. So I love being around everybody, but I'm just step out of this conversation. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, if you just want to step out and not explain yourself, I think that's absolutely okay to do, to just know what's right for you and just step aside. But if you're thinking, what can I say? There's nothing wrong with speaking the truth in a loving, caring, respectful way of what you're feeling and the concerns of harm you have. I always tell people, it's not truth that does, like people say the truth can be hurtful or the truth can be painful. That's not true. Attitude can be painful. The way we approach things can be mean, can be vicious. If we are respectful and loving in how we tell the truth, then it's not mean. Now, if somebody says to you, well, that's mean that you said I made you uncomfortable. Well, then know that they don't seem to care about the fact that somebody's being harmed by their words or their actions or the way they're talking to you. And that's not for you to feel guilty because they don't feel bad. That's for you to be able to go, well, even more reason I might want to leave the room, to yourself, right? Like, okay, this is not going to end in a good place because they're becoming defensive and I didn't address any specific person in the room. Hey, this conversation's making me uncomfortable. You can do it that way too. So there's a lot of different avenues to be able to engage in that conversation, but know that it's okay to walk away. I used to battle. I used to be at that kitchen table and battle, and less and less I engage in that now. A lot. In fact, majority of the time, if I just feel the conversation's going somewhere I'm not comfortable, I'll just go to another room. I find that it's healthier for me. And I notice that the people that tend to be engaging in that conversation tend to be on the same, like people tend to agree, have the same conversation, and others are not as engaged or they leave the room. So, they're having their own conversation. I think, Carly, with you and I, people know where we're coming from because of the work we do. For a lot of people watching right now, the people that they're at the holiday with might not realize why they're bothered by this. So it could be even more difficult to have that conversation. Know that you got to decide for you what's comfortable, what's right. It's not my place to tell you what your boundaries are at that moment of a holiday with family. You got to really decide for yourself and maybe think before you go. How do I want to present this if this comes up? What would I say? I like the language that I learned in Landmark, which is a program I went to a long time ago. And when I hear people say something that maybe is concerning or I disagree with or I think could be doing harm, I might use language like, have you considered the possibility? And then fill in the blank. Is it possible that the way this conversation is going right now, we could be falling into stereotypes that could be sexist, that could do harm? Is it possible? So that we're not saying it is happening. We're trying to engage them to recognize what's happening so they can take ownership on their own level. Because that's really where transformation happens. It rarely happens with like a lecture style conversation. It happens with, is it possible? Can we engage on a one-on-one level? Does that help, Carly?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, great question. It's really an important question. For those on Facebook Live, remember, we are following here. So if you have questions, you can either post them right in the comments of Facebook Live, or you can join Carly and I, and somebody else has joined. So that's awesome. We're going to let this person, we're going to bring them in. I see last name, so I don't want to assume first name. So who is joining us? I made it so you could talk, but maybe you don't have a microphone. It looks like they say you're talking. Let's see. There we go. It's muted you. So let me unmute you so we can hear this person, because we want to get as many questions in it as possible and be able to hear. So right now for that, we lost the person. Okay, bummer. Well, come on back. The person who we just lost, feel free to jump back in. For anybody watching wondering, what do you mean jump back in? There's a link right below this Facebook Live or above it, depending on how your Facebook shows this Facebook Live, in the description that's a Zoom link. You can click in, get right in here and ask a question. You can just talk. If you want to do video, you can join me via video. Carly's with me right now. Carly is a survivor. Carly, I'm not the one revealing that. Carly revealed that earlier, that I know, who does wonderful work, very passionate about this topic, and is joining us also on this. You can join Carly and I. But remember, I'm keeping those questions. And I like the fact somebody already just said, hey, I appreciate you're talking about boundaries, because it really is important in the holidays to take care of yourself and to engage in those conversations. While we're waiting for people to ask questions or to join us, I think we need to discuss another thing, and that is politics don't belong on this topic. Not right now. And what I mean by not right now is the cases that are coming forward are proving true what many of us have known in this line of work for decades. And that is sexual violence is not biased to one political party or belief system. And that is coming true right now. We see people from all political beliefs, all political parties, who it's coming forward, survivors are sharing that these individuals preyed on them, that these individuals committed sexual violence against them from all sides, and that this isn't new. So for people going, what's going on in the world right now? If you actually look back on most of these cases, and a lot of the survivors that are coming forward, many of them are 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. This isn't new. This isn't suddenly happening. It's been happening for a long time. We've had people in the political realm who've been doing this since, really, if you look back at the history of power. So it's not a political thing. And I had to be careful back in the day, because sometimes I would want to react to my political leanings and be biased in how I reacted. And I just stop myself and go, be careful when it comes to talking about sexual violence. Doesn't mean I don't do that in other postings maybe, but when it comes to sexual violence, don't do it, Mike. Don't do it, because it skews the topic and it allows people to think, I don't need to listen to Mike because I view him differently, instead of, hey, Mike's going to have an honest conversation about this regardless of my politics or his politics. That allows us to really engage back and forth, leave the politics out, and talk about how this is across our society. And here's a great question. How do you think we got here? Now, I don't mean how do you think we got here from these survivors coming forward. I mean, how do you think we got to a place where this has been happening for decades and our society hasn't stopped it sooner? Our society has not addressed it on an educational, transformational level 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 10 years ago, and we still aren't right now. We're talking in outrage of how awful this is that this is happening, but have you heard any drastic change in sex education in middle schools and high schools in the last 2 weeks to stop this from happening?
Nope.
It's not being discussed.
Nope.
Carly just said nope. Nobody's talking about that. That's how we change generations. We make sure it doesn't happen to the next one. Are parents going, hey, how do I talk to my children so they never act this way? Nope. You know what we're getting from most parents? How do I talk to my kids about all these predators in the news? Mm-hmm. Instead of how do we look into our own homes and have these conversations? That's really, really, really important. How are we going to raise our children to be good human beings? Instead of, how am I going to raise my kids so they're not a predator? How about that we have a more in-depth conversation than that and talk about really what respect means, what it means to live a respectful life. Now, by the way, anybody watching knows, and I'm a parent, you can say all the right things. You can role model all the right behavior. What parenting is setting a foundation. It is not setting a pathway they will follow necessarily at all, because they're going to be their own individuals. So are we setting the right foundation? They're going to make mistakes. That's going to happen. But are we at least giving our best foundation possible? And when it comes to this topic, that means going deeper than just these news stories and talking about how they might hear inappropriate comments with their friends, and how can you empower them in those moments to have important conversations, just like we're trying to do with Thanksgiving right now in this call. How do you have those conversations? So important to be able to do that. I just want to make sure as we keep going here, if there's been any more, every now and then we see somebody jumping on the line here, and that's on the Zoom line. So I'm just being careful there. That's really important that we keep the politics out. And I know some of you might not be aware, you might not have seen the news, but literally right now we have news reporters that have a journalist that have said, yes, I've done this in the past 24 hours. And what's interesting is I've watched one in particular this week, in fact, in the last 24 hours, where friends of mine from a certain political belief system, when this person was accused and has already said, yes, apologize. So they're owning that part of it. I'm not saying that excuses it. Let's be clear. People going, not him. Like, I thought, no way, him. And I want you to be careful of doing that in front of your children or other people of influence or actually anyone. Because when you say it in front of, for instance, a survivor, and you're not going to know who's a survivor and who's not a survivor. When you say in front of a survivor, oh, I can't believe him, it implies the survivor should have known that their attacker, their offender, their assailant was a predator. Because you just made it sound like we should be able to tell who is and who isn't. And that one was such a good person. I just didn't think they could be. That's really harmful belief system to fall into of not that one. That was a good person. Because see, when you fall into that, you further this myth that predators are this stereotype that we can draw out in a picture of this demographic, this demographic, and this demographic. You stay away from this, it won't happen to you. You further that. What we should recognize is that we should not be surprised by anybody it could be. Because people who abuse power, and that's what this is an abuse of power, tend to be very good at playing roles, right? They're good at playing with power. That's how they stab me. And I don't mean good as in it's a positive. I mean, it's a manipulative, horrible thing, but they've learned a skill set of doing that. And that's how they prey and how they try to get away with it for so long. They play these characters. This is not uncommon. If you look at some of the most infamous criminals of our country when it comes to sexual crimes, they knew how to play a character's role in this. Going all the way back to one that a lot of people remember from my generation, the Bundy case. People remember that he had this charismatic role. This is common. Right. So be careful. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that somebody who wasn't charismatic, that was super quiet to themselves, couldn't either. And that's what I'm trying to say. There is no set demographic. We got to be really careful of that. So as more and more cases come forward, know that it's the dangerous thing here is to assume that no one could or no one could. Look, anyone we know could. And I know somebody going, Mike, not anyone. But our mindset needs to be any personality type, any likes you have in people, that they could do that. Any dislikes you have in people doesn't mean they're any more likely to do this. And so it's just understanding that we need to have more of an open approach to having these conversations. Carly, did you have something you want to add or a question?
I guess on a different topic of, I have business owners, or I have people reach out to me and they say, hey, can you come in and do a quick little presentation on sexual harassment, just so they can have it covered?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure you get this a lot.
Instead the checkbox, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Instead of how do I stop this problem, or how do I address it, or how do we cover our asses,
Yeah. And here's the thing and like you just brought up, Carly, I'm getting a lot of my friends and colleagues, and there's a few on right now, fellow speakers. They'll be like, Mike, you must be crazy busy right now. Like your phone must be off the hook. And I'm actually like, nope. And they're like, what? How can that be? And I said, well, honestly, here's why. The people who are just trying to checkbox, like I have to do something to show I protected myself, they're not calling us because we're an in-depth program, right? We're not a 5-minute conversation. You're going to bring us in to have a really honest conversation with your organization that's going to go deep, that's going to talk about transforming the culture to one of a culture of respect. That means you're not going to go online and do a 2-hour online course where everybody knows to say the right thing, whether they believe it or not. We're not going to be that solution. They're going to look for that solution. They're going to look for the lowest cost, the lowest time invested, and that's what people tend to do. And or you get what you just said, Carly, hey, bring me in 5 to 10 minutes. No. Then why don't you just read them the legal policy if that's what you're going to do? That's not transforming culture. And that's what I mean. We need to have an honest conversation of what does it look like to work in a culture of respect? What does that even look like? A lot of people don't know. They don't know. So that takes an in-depth conversation. So Carly, for anybody who's calling and asking that, say, well, I appreciate you calling. Are you looking to really transform the conversation so this doesn't happen anymore? Or are you looking to do a checkbox program to show you did something? I would flat out ask that question, right? And if they're like, well, obviously I don't want to just checkbox, then help them realize that's what that would be doing. Right? And you don't want to do an injustice to their organization or the people they care about in their organization. So how about you let you come in and do something really magnificent and powerful? I think that's the important conversation there.
Agreed. That's good.
And so I'm looking here, just looking on our Facebook Live, all the people on right now. Remember, you can use the comments section to ask questions, or you can join us at the Zoom address that is right below me, right below the picture. When you do that, when you see my eyes going down, I'm just looking for anybody who's asking questions, because there's been a great conversation. Carly, I appreciate your questions because they're all so important. And so as we're starting to wrap this Facebook Live up, feel free to post last questions if you want up there for anybody watching right now. Feel free to share this, because remember, we've discussed so far maybe how to help have these conversations at Thanksgiving. That means keep the politics out of it. And have a conversation on the topic and what's going on, how long it's been going on. For instance, the Me Too, that campaign, which here's an interesting one. Me Too was started a decade ago by someone no one's giving credit to right now. And it got sort of taken over. Some people use the word co-opt recently 2 weeks ago, and now everybody paid attention. But think about the person who was trying to say, hey, we need to stop this like a decade ago, and we weren't giving proper credit to. Have the conversation about, wow, almost everybody you know has put Me Too. What do we do for our children so that this is not continuing? How do we transform the conversation for our kids? How do we treat each other in our own homes so that we're role modeling respect? What does that mean? How are ways we're currently maybe role modeling behavior that could lead to this disrespectful behavior at times? And by the way, it's okay to look in the mirror and go, yeah, there are some ways I do that, because we're human, we're fallible, right? Every day I read morning affirmations before I sort of start my day. One of them is I'm fallible, right? I'm going to fall down. I use Brene Brown's line of I'm going to fall down, I'm going to rise strong. Rising strong means needing to be honest with myself where I'm fallible and where I fall down. Let's start with that and acknowledge that, so that when we engage others, it's on a more of a, we're coming from the same place versus I'm going to tell you how this works, which just really shuts people down. Now, don't get me wrong. If somebody says something triggering that upsets you and it becomes difficult and you feel you need to speak your mind or you want to speak your mind, that's your place to do that. That is not, I'm not trying to say for anybody out there, don't speak your mind. I'm trying to be most effective in engaging people in long-term conversations. Long-term, where we can try to get that transformation. But you need to speak your mind, to set your boundary, to react to something, then you do that. That's what your voice is for. And we never want to take that away. Carly, any last questions that you have or comments you want to add?
No, I just want to say thank you for getting this conversation started.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to do that. I want to thank everybody who's on right now on this Facebook Live. Remember, you can share this video. So even when we're not live, people can watch it. And what's cool is they can put things in the comment. My organization will keep the Date Safe Project. They'll keep an eye on it over the next day, because I'll give you an example. Tomorrow, I'm out. Like, I'm not in tomorrow. So even if lots of news is happening and everything, unless there's a really exceptional situation, like maybe national news wants us to be able to cover something, unless it's something really unique like that where we can reach millions and have a positive impact, I step away for an entire day, no matter what's going on in the news. Like I asked everyone to do here today, be willing to step away. Right? It's okay to do that. That's healthy for you to do that. And that's what I want you to remember as we sign off here. Take care of you in these times where there's so much negativity. There's so much harm that is coming forth, and that's good for survivors that they're able to come forth and be able to share the harm that was done so they can get either justice or closure or support. All of that's important, but it also means there's a lot of things boiling up that may be very difficult for some, and it's okay to turn it off. To turn off the internet, to turn off the news, to turn off the radio. It's okay to turn off social media. That means if you're not listening to me tonight because you're taking care of you, good for you. Do what you need to do there. That's what's important. And as I go into Thanksgiving, I think of Thanksgiving a different way than the historical way, for many different reasons. I take Thanksgiving as a time to be thankful for all the amazing people that are doing incredible work out there, trying to support survivors and are supporting survivors that are working to reduce sexual violence. And some of you watching right now who have nothing to do with this field of work, but you're doing that in your home. You're doing that with your family and friends. And that's important. And I'm grateful for you. Thank you, Carly, for joining me. Thank you, everyone out there on Facebook, for joining us for this conversation.